The Galactic Council chamber shimmered like a cathedral of stars, its crystalline dome refracting the light of the nearby sun into 1,000 fractured rainbows that danced across the floor. Beneath that dazzling canopy sat the most powerful beings in known space, their voices low and expectant. Feathered Zephyrians with iridescent crests rustled their wings nervously. The silicon-based Crike, crystalline entities that resonated with harmonic tones instead of speech, pulsed and muted. Concern. Ethereal's ancient beings of pure energy hovered like living auroras, their light flickering with faint ripples of emotion. At the center of the crescent-shaped table stood Ambassador Crestal of the Vorth Empire. His towering form, encased in chitinous armor that shimmered like polished obsidian, radiated predatory confidence. 6 cold, multifaceted eyes swept over the assembly like the lenses of a warship's targeting system. His voice, deep and serrated, reverberated through the chamber with the weight of centuries of conquest. Earth will surrender 30% of its industrial output, Crestal declared. You will submit to Vorth oversight and provide tribute. Ships within one standard rotation. The alternative is complete annihilation. The words struck like a hammer. A tremor of unease rippled through the council. The Zephyrians' feathers flared in agitation. The Crike delegates emitted a discordant chime, their crystalline bodies resonating in alarm. Even the ethereals, who rarely betrayed any emotion, dimmed slightly, their radiance faltering. No one doubted the Vorth Empire's power. They had crushed 17 star systems in less than a century. To challenge them was to invite destruction. At the far end of the table, almost swallowed by the grandeur around her, sat Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth, in stark contrast to the resplendent attire of the alien. Envoy's robes woven from starlight, ceremonial armor inlaid with rare metals, Sarah wore a simple charcoal gray suit. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, and instead of a holographic interface or advanced datapad, she appeared to be jotting notes on a sheet of paper with a black pen. More than one delegate found this almost laughably primitive. To them, the human ambassador seemed as harmless and outdated as her tools. Crestal's eyes narrowed as he fixed on her. Human, the Vorth Empire does not offer choices. We give terms. Comply or watch your world burn. Murmurs of pity rose around the chamber. The Trade Federation's delegate, a serpentine being named Velta, coiled and uncoiled in agitation, muttering that humans should accept before their fragile civilization was obliterated. Several delegates exchanged knowing looks. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for less than 2 centuries. To many, they were still the naive newcomers, boasting small fleets and modest colonies, a minor species that had no concept of real war. Sarah's pen paused mid-stroke. Slowly, deliberately, she placed it down on the table. When she rose, her movements were unhurried, yet they commanded attention. Her expression remained neutral, almost serene, but her dark eyes held an intensity that silenced even the restless. Murmurs. With respect to the council, she said, her voice calm yet carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. We decline the generous offer from the Vorth Empire. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. The Zephyrians let out sharp, startled trills. The Crike chimed in discord, their tones shrill with disbelief. The ethereals flickered wildly, their energy forms trembling like disturbed flames. Crestal's mandibles flexed in something between outrage and amusement as his 6 eyes glared. At her, you decline? He said, leaning forward, his voice like grinding stone. Perhaps your translators malfunctioned, human. This is not an offer. This is a demand. Sarah smiled, and that simple expression unsettled the room more than any weapon could. It was not the smile of defiance, but the smile of someone who knows a truth no one else does. She met Crestal's gaze without flinching, "Oh, I heard." "You perfectly, Ambassador," she replied. "We simply choose not to comply." The silence that followed Sarah Chun's refusal was so profound it felt like the chamber itself was holding its breath. The crystalline dome above caught the shifting colors of the ethereal's distressed glow, painting the delegates' faces in shades of ghostly light. Crestel's armored mandibles flexed as he took a single step toward her, the metallic echo of his footfall reverberating through the chamber like the toll of a war drum. The Vorth Ambassador was a towering figure, a predator bred from a lineage of conquest. His voice, low and vibrating with restrained fury, carried across the hall. "You refuse the Vorth Empire? Do you truly comprehend what you are saying, human?" His 6 eyes narrowed, refracting the Council's ambient light like shards of dark crystal. "Do you understand the consequences of denying me?" Sarah did not flinch. Instead, she reached for her pen again, calmly writing something on her paper pad with steady, deliberate strokes. The gesture, so quiet and trivial amid the storm of tension, drew baffled stares from the gathered alien leaders. It was as though she was making note of Crestel's threats as casually as one might jot down a shopping list. When she finally looked up, there was no fear in her face. "I understand perfectly," she said, her voice still unshaken. "But before you presume we're making a mistake, perhaps you should consider that your assessment of humanity has been incomplete." Chamber stirred at her words, a low ripple of murmurs and harmonic tones spreading among the delegates. Velta, the serpentine envoy of the hegemony, tilted her head, her scales catching the light as her long body coiled tighter in nervous anticipation. "Incomplete?" she hissed. "You have fewer than 50 registered ships and council records. Your colonies are scattered and underdeveloped. What possible strength could you have to warrant this arrogance?" Sarah's smile sharpened. "You're measuring strength by the wrong metrics. You're looking at numbers, fleets, and visible power. But you've never seen what we truly are when pushed to the brink." Crestel's laughter rolled through the chamber like a storm of grinding metal. "We have watched your species. Your so-called wars are petty skirmishes. You fought pirates, resource disputes, border raids. You know nothing of real war." Sarah slowly walked around the table, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, the sound somehow magnified by the tense silence. Every step she took felt deliberate, every motion carefully measured. "Those weren't wars," she said evenly. "Those were police actions, Ambassador, controlled conflicts. We haven't fought a real war in over 300 years. Her words landed with weight. Even the ethereals paused their ceaseless energy flicker, their bodies dimming into stillness. 300 years? One of them murmured, its voice like the whisper of wind over glass. "Why?" Sarah stopped directly in front of Crestel, her stature barely reaching his chest, yet her presence filled the space between them. "Because we're too good at it," she said quietly, but every syllable carried across the chamber. "We're so good at war that when we fight, we tend to leave nothing left to fight back." The chamber's reaction was electric. The crake emitted a startled chime so high-pitched it made the crystalline dome vibrate faintly. The Zephyrians exchanged uneasy glances, their feathered crests trembling with instinctive fear. Even the seasoned diplomats of older empires shifted uneasily in their seats. Arrogant words from such a fragile species. Crestel snarled. "Empty threats? Empty?" Sarah's tone was almost conversational now, as though they were discussing weather rather than the annihilation of entire civilizations. "Do you know how many ways we've learned to destroy ourselves? Before we even left our planet's atmosphere, we had already invented 17 distinct methods of splitting the atom. We could erase entire cities with the push of a button. We learned to harness diseases, weather, and even AI as weapons before most of you mastered interstellar flight. The holoprojector embedded in the council table flickered to life with Sarah's subtle gesture. Historical images filled the chamber footage of nuclear detonations, mushroom clouds devouring cities, and soldiers wading through trenches filled with poisonous gas. The delegates flinched as they watched these moments, the sheer brutality and scale of destruction alien to their structured, formalized wars. "This is who we are," Sarah continued, her voice steady. "A species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing itself. A species that unified only when it realized our capacity for violence was about to consume us all." Crestel's voice grated against the sudden silence. "If your kind is so deadly, why hide? Why cower behind these false smiles of diplomacy?" "Because the galaxy fears strength," Sarah replied, her gaze sweeping across the delegates. "And the feared are always challenged. We join this council to learn, to trade, to build alliances, not to conquer. But do not mistake restraint for weakness." The words hung heavy, as though they carried the weight of all of humanity's history. Sarah returned to her seat with deliberate calm, the hala images fading, but the impression of fire and ruin lingering in every delegate's mind. Crestel leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in irritation. "So what will you do, human? Your defiance is noted. Are you prepared to be wiped from existence?" Sarah picked up her pen again, tapping it once against her paper pad before meeting his gaze. "Ambassador Crestel, you're making a fatal mistake, but you'll see soon enough." The tension spiked to a razor's edge as Sarah's quiet confidence clashed with the Vorth's towering arrogance. In the charged silence, it became clear that humanity's answer had only just begun to take shape. The chamber felt different now, as though the very air had grown heavier. The echoes of Sarah Chen's quiet defiance still hung like a phantom in every corner of the vast crystalline dome. Crestel's 6 eyes narrowed to slits, the predatory gleam in them hardening into rage. "You speak of mistakes, human," he growled, his voice scraping like steel against stone. "You forget that the Vorth Empire does not tolerate insolence. I could order the destruction of your colonies before this meeting ends." Sarah leaned back slightly in her chair, almost relaxed. Her calmness was unnerving to those around her. A being of the Crike delegation, a towering, crystalline figure whose body resonated with soft harmonic tones, spoke with static-laced unease. "Perhaps Earth should reconsider," the Crike suggested, its voice breaking in unnatural dissonance. "The Vorth fleet is vast. Their weapons crack moons." Sarah tilted her head slightly. "Weapons that crack moons? Impressive." Her tone was not sarcastic, but measured, like someone evaluating the sharpness of a blade. "But do you know what happens when a species fights for 10,000 years before ever leaving its homeworld? We learned to split atoms before we built reliable spacecraft. We learned to melt cities into glass before we mapped our oceans. We've made our skies burn, our rivers poison, and yet we survived." The holoprojector on the council table flared to life again. Sarah hadn't touched it, but her AI assistant embedded in the device recognized her voice commands seamlessly. The chamber was instantly filled with images from Earth's violent history, ancient wars painted in blood and fire. Armies clashing across muddy plains, mechanical beasts of steel tearing through landscapes, cities engulfed by storms of fire. A still image froze over the chamber, the black and white footage of a mushroom cloud rising over Hiroshima. "Earth year 1945, Sarah said quietly. A single device, small enough to fit into the hull of a dropship, turned a city to ash. Do you know how many people died that day? 70,000 in less than a heartbeat. A ripple of horror spread through the assembly. The Zephyrians, feathered crests puffed out in instinctive fear, their voices clicking in agitation. The ethereal's energy forms dimmed as if recoiling. Crestel's mandibles twitched, but he said nothing. The holo shifted again, now showing the charred ruins of Nagasaki, then a flood of images, massive tanks rolling across battlefields, missiles streaking across dark skies, drones swarming like mechanical locusts. By 1960, we had enough weapons to wipe our own species from existence 50 times over, Sarah continued. And that was before we left our solar system. Velta of the hegemony hissed, her serpentine coils shifting uneasily. If such things are true, why have we not seen them? Why does your fleet appear so small, so primitive? Sarah began to walk, her shoes clicking softly against the polished crystal floor. She circled the table, her presence growing with each step. Her voice was low but carried an edge that sliced through the tension. Because you're not looking in the right places. You see agricultural colonies, research outposts, trading stations. You see what we want you to see. Do you think we'd show you the real teeth of humanity? Crestel barked a laugh. Bluff. Lies. You would not hide such power if you truly had it. Sarah stopped directly in front of him, her gaze unwavering. Despite being half his size, her voice cut through his laughter. You've never seen humans at war. Not really. You've seen a version of us we allow you to see polite, cooperative, diplomatic. But do you want to know the truth, Ambassador Crestel? We haven't fought a real war in 3 centuries. Not because we forgot how, but because when we fight, there's nothing left of the enemy. The room fell deathly silent. Even the ambient hum of the council system seemed to pause. The ethereals flickered uncertainly, their energy forms trembling with unease. The Crike delegate whispered in its melodic static, "Surely, this is exaggeration." Sarah turned to the Crike, her voice suddenly softer, almost pitying. "Do you think I exaggerate? Our planet's history is filled with wars where millions died in days. We created weapons that turned weather into a weapon, poisons that dissolved the lungs of soldiers, machines that could hunt humans in forests and cities alike. You've seen war as a distant ceremonial thing. We lived it as an art." She looked up toward the crystalline dome, and for a moment her eyes reflected the rainbow light like steel catching fire. "Do you know why we're still here, despite all of that? Because we learned the ultimate lesson of survival. The most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate." Crestel's mandibles flexed again, but now his silence spoke louder than any insult. The other delegates shifted, suddenly unsure if the Vorth Empire had overplayed its hand. Sarah returned to her seat, her every movement deliberate, controlled. She set her pen down gently, the sound of it against the table echoing in the silence. "You asked what we will do, Ambassador Crestel," she said softly. "We'll do what humanity has always done. We'll survive. And if you force us to show you how, you won't like what you see." For the first time since the session began, Crestel's predatory confidence faltered. The silence that followed was no longer one of disbelief. It was the kind of silence that comes when the predators in the room realize there's another predator watching them. The council chamber quivered under an invisible weight. Sarah Chen's words had sunk into the bones of every delegate, but it was what she did next that turned unease into raw fear. Without raising her voice, she lifted a small communicator from her jacket pocket. The sleek black device looked harmless, but the council's collective attention zeroed in on it as though it were a weapon. She pressed a single button. "Admiral Morrison," she said, her voice calm but carrying the unmistakable tone of command. "This is Ambassador Chen. Please respond to Council Chamber 7. A moment of static hummed through the rooms. Speakers. Then a voice, smooth and sharp like polished steel, cut through the silence. "Admiral Morrison here, Ambassador. Standing by with the 7th Fleet at designated coordinates." The reaction was immediate. The Zephyrian delegation rustled their brilliant feathers in a flurry of alarm, a chorus of chittering filling the air. the silicon-based Crike emitted, a discordant hum that made the crystalline dome overhead resonate faintly. Even the ancient ethereals flickered with sudden, sharp pulses of energy. Crestal tilted his massive head, his 6 eyes glinting like molten amber. "Your fleet?" he sneered, though there was a tremor beneath the contempt. "A dozen ships, perhaps 2, armed with outdated weapons?" Sarah's lips curved into a small, predatory smile. "Admiral, how many ships are currently operational?" "In the 7th Fleet?" "Counting all combat-ready vessels, ma'am, 1,237, Morrison replied. The chamber froze. It was as if time itself hesitated, unable to process the number. A shocked hush swept across the assembly, interrupted only by the low, harmonic murmuring of the Crike attempting to calculate impossible probabilities. That's more ships than the entire Vorth Corps defense armada," hissed Velta of the hegemony, her serpentine form coiling tightly, her eyes wide with disbelief. Crestal's mandibles tightened. "Lies," he spat, though his tone had lost its previous conviction. "Fabrications meant to intimidate. Admiral," Sarah interrupted softly, her gaze never leaving Crestal. "Initiate transparency protocol. Full disengagement of all stealth systems across human-controlled space." "Yes, Ambassador." "Executing now." The Council's personal data consoles erupted with alarms. Every scanning device, every monitoring system, every ship sensor began feeding new data into their interfaces. What had once appeared as empty starfields were now flooded with contacts, hundreds, no, thousands of vessels materializing across every known sector. Massive shipyards emerged from the shadows of asteroid belts. Battle platforms with weapon arrays the size of small moons uncloaked in remote systems. Near the very station where the Council convened, 2 colossal dreadnoughts flickered into view, bristling with weaponry and flanked by squadrons of sleek destroyers. Gasps and sharp cries filled the chamber. Delegates clutched their consoles as readouts flooded their screens with impossible numbers. The ethereal's light forms pulsed erratically, flickering like lightning trapped inside crystal. "Impossible," whispered Mordaic of the Trade Federation. How could we not see this?" Sarah's voice was smooth, almost conversational, as she turned back to the Council. "Because we wanted you to see exactly what we allowed. For 3 centuries, we've cultivated an imageous species of traders, explorers, diplomats. We built this mask to survive, and you all believed it. You assumed our silence meant weakness. But the truth is, every agricultural colony you visited has a fleet waiting in the shadows. Every research station doubles as a forward operating base. Every ship, even civilian transports, can be converted into a war vessel within hours." Crestal's composure cracked for the first time. He took a single step back, the shift in his posture subtle but unmistakable. His voice, once booming and full of dominance, wavered. What is this madness? No species could hide this. Scale of force. Sarah's eyes hardened, her voice turning cold. You didn't look hard enough. Or maybe you never believed that humanity was capable of outthinking you. We learned long ago that the deadliest predator is the one that knows how to stay invisible. Admiral Morrison's voice broke the silence. "Ma'am, all fleets confirm readiness. 3rd, 9th, and 5th 10th fleets are holding positions as ordered. Damocles' platform is fully armed and awaiting target designation." Sarah's gaze swept the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate. "For years, we've endured your condescension. Your assumptions that humans were weak, primitive, harmless. We were patient because we sought peace. But let me make this perfectly clear. If the Vorth Empire attacks Earth, we will respond not with words, not with sanctions, but with the full weight of every weapon we've hidden from your sight. The chamber was chaos now. The Zephyrian's feathers puffed up in distress, clicking in frantic alarm. The Crike emitted wild, clashing notes as if their crystalline bodies could not decide what frequency matched their fear. Even the ethereals, beings of pure light and thought, dimmed into pale halos as they processed the unthinkable. Sarah didn't move. She simply picked up her pen again, calmly tapping it against her notepad. "Admiral," she said, her voice a blade of ice, "prepare to brief the Council on fleet distribution and strike readiness." "Yes, Ambassador," Morrison replied, his tone all business. "We currently have targeting solutions on every Vorth shipyard, command station, and military outpost across 17 systems. Time to neutralization from order, 14 minutes. The room froze. Crestel's 6 eyes darted from the data flooding the Council's holographic displays back to Sarah's unwavering gaze. In that silence, the balance of power shifted. For the first time, the predator looked like prey. The Council chamber was no longer a place of diplomacy, but a crucible of fear and realization. The shock of seeing entire human fleets materialize across every sector had shattered the illusion of balance the Galactic Council believed it maintained. Whispers of disbelief rippled among the delegates, their voices a collage of fear, awe, and barely concealed panic. Crestel's towering frame, once a pillar of authority, now seemed smaller beneath the crystalline dome's refracted light. His 6 eyes flicked from screen to screen as human warships and orbital platforms lit up his personal display like constellations of fire. Sarah Chen stood motionless, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. She was no longer the underestimated envoy with a paper pad and a simple suit. She was the face of a species that had just unveiled its shadowed fangs. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet but carried with the weight of inevitability. "For 3 centuries, she said, we've played the role you wanted us to play. Explorers, diplomats, a species eager to prove we belonged among you. But we never forgot who we were. We never forgot the lessons carved into our history by centuries of blood and fire." The hollow projector flared again, showing humanity's evolution not as a timeline of progress, but as a testament to survival through violence. Ancient battles swept across the hologram warriors with swords, muskets, tanks, fighter jets, nuclear, fire blooming like hellish flowers over distant horizons. "You measure strength by fleets and colonies," Sarah continued, her gaze sweeping across the chamber. "But strength is not numbers. Strength is surviving when you shouldn't. Strength is fighting until the universe itself trembles." Velta, the Serpentine delegate, shifted uneasily, her coils scraping against the polished floor. "If what you say is true, why have you concealed this? The treaties? The accords?" "This violates nothing," Sarah interrupted sharply. "Every treaty we've signed, we've honored. You never asked how many ships we had. You never asked what our research stations were building in the dark. We didn't lie. We simply never put our cards on the table." Crestel's mandibles clicked with agitation, his voice rough with growing unease. "You expect us to believe you could hide fleets of this size? Entire armadas cloaked in plain sight? It's impossible." Sarah's lips curled into a faint, cold smile. "Impossible? We've been perfecting the art of invisibility since before we left our solar system. When you've spent 10,000 years learning to kill each other, you get very good at hiding from your own enemies. Cloaking a few fleets across the galaxy? That was the easy part." The ethereals flickered uncertainly, their forms pulsing like nervous stars. "You hide because you fear being feared," one of them murmured, its voice a cascade of chimes. A predator pretending to be prey. Sarah didn't deny it. "Yes, we came here to be your neighbors, not your conquerors. We wanted peace." "But peace," she said, her voice sharpening, "isn't given. It's secured." And now you forced us to remind you what kind of species you're dealing with." Her gaze fell back on Crestel, who had gone silent for the first time since entering the chamber. "Your empire made a fatal error," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a low, lethal tone. "You mistook our silence for weakness. You mistook our patience for fear. And now you forced me to tell you what we've been preparing for 300 years. Crestel's claws flexed. "You think to threaten the Vorth Empire?" "I'm not threatening," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm telling you a fact. Humanity doesn't seek war, Ambassador, but if war comes to us, it will be short and it will be final. Do you know why we haven't fought a true war since we unified Earth? Because when we fight, we end things. Permanently." A quiet murmur swept through the council chamber like a gust of cold wind. Sarah raised her communicator again. "Admiral Morrison," she said. "Report on strategic readiness." "Ma'am," Morrison's voice answered, unwavering. "Our fleets have confirmed strike solutions on all Vorth strategic assets. Estimated time to neutralize all military infrastructure, 14 minutes. The number hit like a hammer. 14 minutes. An empire reduced to silence in less than the span of a council session. Crestel's chest rose and fell with shallow, controlled breaths. His mandibles quivered as he spoke, the arrogance in his tone now muted by a threat of fear. "You? You wouldn't dare." Sarah's eyes were steel. "Try me." The silence that followed was absolute. The delegates looked from Sarah to Crestel, then back to the terrifying holographic constellation of humanity's hidden war power. The very foundations of galactic politics trembled. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice softer, but no less. "Dangerous. We don't want war. We don't want to rule. We only want what we always wanted, to be left in peace. But if you think for one moment that we won't fight, you have no idea who we really are." The chamber's temperature felt colder, and even the ethereal's light dimmed, as if acknowledging the shadow humanity had cast over the galaxy. The words 14 minutes hung in the chamber like the tolling of a death knell. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the subtle hum of the council's life support system seemed to recede, as though the room itself understood the gravity of the moment. Crestel, once towering and uncheckable, stood frozen. His 6 predatory eyes darted across the holographic projections of human fleets that filled the center of the chamber, vast constellations of warships, stealth platforms, and orbital cannons, all aimed and waiting. Sarah Chen did not speak immediately. She let the silence work for her, let it sink deep into the minds of those who had misjudged humanity. When she finally did speak, her tone was quiet and deliberate, like a blade slowly unsheathed. "You see, Ambassador," she said, her eyes locked on Crestel, "war isn't a threat for humanity. It's our oldest language. Every culture on Earth learned to speak it long before we ever learned peace. And if you force us to speak it again—" She paused, letting her words echo. "You will not have 14 days or even 14 hours to regret it. You will have 14 minutes. The chamber erupted not with noise, but with a shudder of fear so palpable it was like a physical force. The Zephyrian's feathers stood on end, clicking nervously as they whispered frantic calculations to one another. The Crag delegates emitted high-pitched, disharmonic tones that made the crystalline dome vibrate faintly. Even the ethereals, ancient beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, pulsed with chaotic flickers of light, unable to mask their unease. Crestel tried to gather himself, but the crack in his confidence was clear now. His mandibles twitched, and his voice, when it came, no longer boomed with the same authority. "You claim you could destroy the Vorth Empire so quickly? Bluff. All of this is a performance." Sarah tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but predatory. "Admiral Morrison, confirm targeting priorities." The Admiral's voice came through the communicator like a sharpened blade. All systems locked. 17 Vorth shipyards, 9 orbital command stations, and every major fleet installation across your empire are in our sights. Estimated time from execution order to full neutralization: 13 minutes, 58 seconds, and counting. Crestals. Breath caught, and his claws scraped against the podium as if anchoring him. Around the chamber, delegates stared at Sarah, seeing her not as a diplomat, but as something far more dangerous, a quiet predator, holding the fate of worlds in her hands. Sarah's gaze swept the chamber now, not just Crestal. "Do you all understand what you're witnessing?" she asked. "You think humanity's strength lies in its technology, in its fleets. It doesn't. Our strength lies here." She tapped her temple with a finger. "In our willingness to prepare for every nightmare we can imagine, to turn every weakness into a weapon. For centuries, we let you all believe we were fragile. We hid behind smiles and trade agreements because we didn't want this day to come." She turned back to Crestal. "But you brought this day to us, Ambassador. You demanded tribute. You threatened annihilation. And now I offer you a choice. Withdraw your ultimatum and leave, or stay this course and watch your empire vanish before your first ship leaves dock." The weight of her words was absolute. A hush fell over the delegates. Some avoided looking at Crestal altogether, unwilling to be associated with his looming disaster. The ethereal speaker, Saramith, pulsed softly as they spoke for the first time since the fleets had appeared. "Ambassador Chen, humanity's position is formidable, but such a display of power will not be forgotten. Do you intend to maintain this posture of war?" Sarah's eyes softened slightly, but her voice remained unwavering. "We don't seek war, Speaker Saramith. We never did. But if someone comes for us, if anyone dares, then the only posture we know is to end the threat. Quickly. Decisively." Crestal tried to speak, but his voice cracked like splintering stone. You're bluffing. If you truly had such power, you would have taken the galaxy long ago." Sarah took one step toward him. "And that's the part you'll never understand. We don't conquer for the sake of conquest. We don't wage war to feel powerful. We fight only when there is no other choice, and when we fight." Her gaze turned icy. "We don't leave survivors." Her communicator crackled again. Admiral Morrison's voice was clear and sharp. "Ambassador, all human fleets report full combat readiness. Shall I proceed with the Damocles simulation for visual confirmation?" Sarah nodded slightly. "Yes, Admiral. Show them." In an instant, the holographic projection in the center of the chamber changed. It displayed a real-time feed of the 7th Fleet and Formation sleek warships cloaked in black hulls that absorbed starlight, their weapon systems glowing faintly like coiled predators ready to strike. Then, without warning, one of the fleet's dreadnoughts unleashed a controlled, non-lethal demonstration shot. A pulse of energy lanced across the feed, vaporizing a barren moon in the far corner of human-controlled space. The moon didn't. Exploded, disintegrated, torn apart in seconds as though it had never existed. Gasps filled the chamber. The Zephyrians shrieked softly. The Crike delegates' harmonics broke into chaotic, off-key tones. Even the ethereals flickered so violently that their light almost extinguished. Sarah let the silence stretch again before she spoke, her voice steady and final. 14 minutes, Ambassador. That's all it takes. What happens next is your decision." Crestal's defiance crumbled, his mandibles opening and closing without a sound. Finally, he lowered his head. "The ultimatum is withdrawn," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Sarah smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Excellent. I'm glad we can resolve this peacefully." The fleets remained visible for a moment longer, a silent promise that Earth's patience had limits. Then, with a single command from Morrison, They vanished, returning to the shadows of space, invisible once more but never forgotten. The council chamber was a graveyard of silence when the last echoes of Admiral Morrison's voice faded. Every alien delegate sat frozen, their expressions a mixture of awe, fear, and reluctant respect. The once imposing Vorth ambassador, Crestel, now looked like a predator who had finally recognized a superior hunter. His 6 eyes avoided Sarah Chen's gaze, his mandibles clenched in an effort to hide his shaken composure. The ultimatum had been withdrawn, but the weight of what had just transpired would echo across the galaxy for centuries. Sarah stood calmly, gathering her notes and communicator. The image of simplicity, the charcoal gray suit, the paper pad. The pen seemed almost mocking now, like the camouflage of a creature that had been hiding claws sharper than any blade. She turned to the council, her voice steady and deliberate, yet edged with a subtle warning. "Let this be understood by all present," she began. "Humanity did not come to the stars to dominate. We came to explore, to trade, and to find allies. Among the civilizations of this galaxy, we sought to build bridges, not battlefields. But if we are threatened, we will defend ourselves swiftly, decisively, and with every ounce of power we possess." The ethereal speaker, Sarameth, flickered faintly as they addressed her, their voice like the resonance of wind through crystal. "Ambassador Chen, the display your fleets have made today will not be forgotten. Many here will see this as a betrayal, a deception spanning centuries. Do you not fear that the galaxy will unite against you for this revelation?" Sarah's gaze shifted to Sarameth, her eyes cold but unflinching. "You ask if we fear unity against us," she said, pausing just long enough for her words to strike. "We do not. Fear is a luxury we burned out of our DNA 1,000 years ago. We don't want a galaxy united against us, but if that's what Commies, we will endure it as we have endured everything else. You call it deception, we call it survival." A ripple of unease spread among the delegates. Some turned away, unable to meet her eyes. Others, like the Zephyrian representatives, leaned forward with newfound interest, their feathered crests no longer trembling but bristling with something close to admiration. Crestel finally spoke, his voice hollow and stripped of arrogance. "Your fleets may intimidate, human, but the galaxy will not bend forever to threats. Power like yours breeds fear, and fear breeds enemies." Sarah stepped closer to him, her every movement controlled, precise. "We don't need the galaxy to bend," she said quietly. "We just need it to think twice before raising a hand against us. If you want to test the limits of that, Ambassador Crestel, know this. Humanity doesn't fight wars to win territory or prestige. We fight to end them. Once we begin, there's no going back." Her communicator blinked with a soft light. Admiral Morrison's voice came through, calm and professional. "Ambassador, all fleets have returned to stealth configuration. The Damocles platform stands down. Shall I transmit the council session recording to all human colonies as planned?" Sarah smiled faintly, but her eyes remained sharp. "Do it. Every citizen, every soldier, every child will know what happened here today. And the galaxy should know as well. Our patience is not weakness, and our peace is not submission." The Zephyrian delegate, still staring at the space where the holograms of human fleets had just been, finally spoke. "You have changed everything," she said softly. "From this day on, no one will look at your species the same way." Sarah nodded, her tone quiet but final. "Good. The age of underestimating humanity is over." She gathered her papers and began to walk toward the grand crystalline doors. Her footsteps echoed through the chamber, steady and unhurried, each step striking like a drumbeat of inevitability. Every delegate watched her leave, their minds racing to reevaluate the humans they had once mocked as fragile and naive. Behind her, Whispers began to swell of alliances reconsidered, of new power balances, of a future where the quiet predator from the blue world would no longer be ignored. Crestel remained still, his 6 eyes locked on Sarah's retreating form. For the first time in his life, he felt the cold edge of fear, a fear not of a superior fleet, but of a species that had mastered the art of appearing harmless while sharpening its weapons in silence. Outside the Council Station's massive viewport, the void of space seemed unchanged. Yet, somewhere in that void, human fleets waited unseen, patient, and deadly. The galaxy knew now that these were not explorers with weak wills. These were predators cloaked as diplomats, warriors who smiled while holding the power to burn. Empires to ash in minutes. Sarah paused at the doorway, turning her head slightly to address the chamber one last time. Her voice carried effortlessly through the crystalline acoustics. Remember this day well. It's not a declaration of war, it's a promise that humanity will never again be underestimated. We've survived everything we've done to ourselves. Do not test what we can do to others. And with that, she walked out, leaving an unshakable silence in her wake. The delegates, once confident rulers of their empires, sat paralyzed, each of them realizing the same chilling truth: the most dangerous predator in the galaxy was not the one with the biggest claws. It was the one who had convinced everyone it was prey until it was too late.